Hey, what did you talk about this week?
Welcome back to the Corporate Kitchen. I'm your host, Tiger. This week we've been talking about consultants. I know that first episode when we were talking in the kitchen may have been a little rough. I do apologize for that if it wasn't the greatest, but also there was seemingly a lot of criticism in regards to consultants. The reality is they are needed. They exist because they answer a need that exists right now in corporate America. A lot of problems are attempted to be solved with the team at hand. Sometimes you just need specialists and expertise that exists outside of your team and assistance on that. These consultant agencies didn't get as big as they are now if they weren't doing some level of positivity in the community and with these corporations. Again, they have a framework that they kind of work to because they've gotten so big, but naturally it makes sense considering that they have so many people and they want to maintain a certain mythology and a certain perspective when they approach problems. Makes sense. Where does that leave you? The first action I want to give you is to embrace the consultant team. First story I'll give you is my own personal of dealing with a consultant team. It's funny because when you work in corporate America for a while and it's brought up that a consultant team is coming in, it's normally spur of the moment. And that's what happened here. It wasn't like, oh, hey, we're going to have this agency come in about a couple months. Let's prepare or let's kind of decide what the project's going to be. It's like, no, they're going to be here next week working on an event. And that's what happened. We were told that the agency was coming in the next week and we'll hear about the projects the next week. It's like, okay, that doesn't really give us time to prepare. So once the following week came up, the quote unquote next week came, that Monday, we got the flow down from leadership of what issues the agency was coming in to address. Because you can't pull everyone off their day-to-day assignment to support something like this, certain people get nominated, chosen, or voluntold to assist. And that's where the first action comes in. Embrace the consultant team and the opportunity to work with them. Again, we can't have 100% of the staff supporting whatever project or deep dive is being done with the consultant team because you would miss out on production, manufacturing, whatever the corporation's supposed to be doing on the day to day. And we can't have that. I was one of those people that was elected to work with the agency. So I spent some time understanding what they were looking for, what information they needed, what support they needed, how they needed that support. And we spent probably a good 2 weeks. It wasn't a significantly long project. Some consultant projects could be months, some could be a day, some could be a couple weeks. This one was a couple weeks. Spent some time, worked with them. It was one group of people that I worked with for the entire duration. That's not necessarily the same that happens on the longer term projects. If it's short term, less than a month, it should be the same people. But once you extend to longer periods of time, it may not be the same group that you're working with. Because it was only 2 weeks, I was working with the same group of people. And at the end of the 2 weeks, they actually presented out. I didn't have to do any presentation, but I helped support it, the presentation documentation that they were making. They presented out to leadership. I sat in the room with the rest of the audience and, yay, I raised my hand on, yeah, I supported this. And the executive leadership was like so excited, so happy. And here's the best part that comes out of that, right? They do the presentation, everyone shakes hands, high fives. And it's like, what's next? For this particular project, there verbally was a direction to have follow-up actions. Did those actually manifest anything? No. They did not. It was a directive of, hey, let's do some follow up next week, get the actions down, and track them to closure. Next week came, and we went right back to business as usual. I don't know if anyone ever revisited that project or if anyone else decided to take the action items that came out of it and run with it. I wasn't involved, and neither was my group. I mentioned that to tell you that in certain industries, they will hire consultant agencies, get all the feedback from them, and then put them in a shelf. Like, won't even work it, or they will take the approach that should be done and receive all that feedback and actually action it, track it to closure, and make sure people work it. But with this project, we did it, and nothing came out of it. It didn't hurt me mentally. Like, I wasn't disappointed or disheartened. I've gotten feedback from people that were more tenured in the group about how the consultations work and what normally happens. A lot of people just eye roll and they're like, we've said this before, we did this before. So my expectations were already at a level where I was prepared to deal with no follow-up action. However, the one thing that I do appreciate is that since I did take the approach and the action to embrace the team, I got to meet some cool new people and get some fresh perspectives that I normally wouldn't have gotten in my day-to-day work. To be able to talk to people that look at the same data you're seeing without working in your company and come to the same conclusions that you do, very validating. It is very validating. And I think it draws a lot of people's frustration when you spend more than 10, 20 years in a company saying the same thing for 20 years. They hire a consultant agency to come in, look at the same problem, come up with the same solution. And it's like, I've already told you. You see how that could be frustrating for some people? So at the same time, though, I was early in my career when I did this particular project. So for me, it was very validating. And I was happy about it because I'm like, okay, I am newer, but I understand what's going on here. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to be able to really dissect and truly understand how to make this into a good meal. No, it's clear as day. It's as simple as putting French fries in the air fryer. It wasn't a lot to it. There was a direct correlation between cause and effect. We knew what we needed to do. We just needed the leadership buy-in to really accept what the issue was and support the solution. You see this a lot of times with, if you think at home with your appliances, right? The KitchenAid is great. KitchenAid is great, but it's expensive. That happens in corporate America all the time. It's like, continue using the hand mixer because we don't want to spend the money to give you a true solution. We'll just band-aid it with certain other things. But the action still holds. Embrace the consultant team. It is an opportunity. And as long as you're not voluntold, if you're voluntold, I can understand that you really don't want to do it. But if you're nominated or you're given an opportunity, it's also a nice breakup of your everyday life and everyday work. It's a nice switch up to be able to get some different experiences with different people from what you do every day. So embrace it. The second part of it too, in regards to the out brief and the output, same company, different project that we were working on with the consulting group. I was not specifically involved in the project. While they were doing the consultation, they reached out to the cross-functional teams to gather data and work the issue. I was not a part of the team. However, at the out brief, when the consultant agency was presenting, here's what we found, here's what you need to know, and here's the recommended actions. For this particular project, there was a initiative created in order to address the items that the consultant agency brought up. They coined it a specific name, made it, tradey, where people were, that's trendy. Sorry, it's not tradey. Trendy. The name of the initiative they made trendy in order to make people understand the work that's being done is supporting the company, but it's not a part of the everyday, right? If you're working for a company and it's like, hey, I'm going to work this extracurricular project, your manager may be like, what is it for? Or why are you doing that? We need you to do your work. But with this trendy name, now it's like, okay, you're working that initiative. Got it. Understood. Make sure you get your current work done. But yes, definitely work that as much as you can. Had a whole initiative about it. I was one of the people that had to work one of the actions that came out of the list of actions that needed to be done. The second action that I want you to take away at the table with this is look for guidance from your leadership on how to handle these situations. As I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of times in which companies would receive consultations, they would get the feedback, they would get an action plan, and they would designate that action plan to someone, but then they don't follow it through to closure. They don't know what the success criteria looks like, and they don't necessarily put a target metric on it in order to show the success or the improvement needed of those actions taken from the consultation. Therefore, you have to look for your leadership for guidance on how to handle these consultations. I remember at one company, I wasn't there for the project again. This is different than what I just mentioned earlier. I wasn't there for the project and I wasn't there for the outbrief, but they did work the actions to closure and it created a system in the manufacturing organization that they were working to when I joined the team. When I talked to some of the tenured people and got the feedback of why we're on this system and how did we get to this, they were like, oh, no, this system isn't new. It's what we were on. And we actually hired a consultant. Their response was to get out of the system. And then they hired a new consultant probably 10 years later that told them to go right back into the system. So that was kind of like a full circle, really funny moment. And I had to get guidance on like, okay, well, if you've paid for consultation that says don't do this system, and then the second time you paid for another consultation, they said go back into the system. And now I'm hearing rumors that we're about to do another consultation. What's the guidance for me? And even if we don't do the consultation, you want me to improve the system. We've gotten feedback already. How do you want me to handle this? Make sure you have that alignment in your direct leadership. Executives will say, this is what we're doing. Here's what the initiative is. I want this to happen. But the execution is going to come from the lower levels. And you got to align with the mid-level management on what you're going to do in order to support that initiative or that action. Again, and don't feel bad. Don't feel like your time is wasted if you're in a situation where the outbrief to the consultation happens, the company delegates the actions out and says, go work what they mentioned, and then they never follow up. They don't see if you finished it. They don't check in to see how your progress is going. They had that one meeting where they told you to go work it and you never heard again. That's unfortunately normal. That also means that when you're hearing from the consultants, their word isn't absolute. When I've probably heard a good 6 or 7 outbriefs from different consultations, and a lot of their ideas, again, are something that we already thought about, but then they have revolutionary ideas, something to really change the way that the organization or the company operates that would require significant capital investment or software investment. But regardless, it's going to require the use of money. And anytime something requires the use of money, everyone just red flag goes up. If we're going to have to pay for it, leadership's most likely not going to do it, or they're going to ask, what's the cost before they say they're not going to do it. Those operating changes, that really system level changes that requires that investment, sometimes a hard sell. So that means you can't really take the word of a consultant as absolute. You can't take it as that's the only way this problem could be fixed. Just like you wouldn't take your word for it and you would seek other people's opinions on something, but that other person's opinion isn't Bible, isn't absolute, you can't use the words of your consultants as absolute. Every project that I've been on, that and every outbrief that I've heard from a consultation, I never took their words as absolute. And it wasn't necessarily a nitpicky thing of, like I mentioned earlier, of the finance portion where I know leadership is not going to support because of the finance. It's more so a thing of they're with us for a very short period of time in the grand scheme of things. You've been in the company, let's even call it a year. You've only been with the company a year. The project that they are providing consultation on is not going to last a year. It's going to last, let's call it 2 months. So they would have worked with the company for 2 months. You would be a year and 2 months. You have a year on them. You know a little bit more than they do. So although they're providing a good, fresh perspective that you can use, you shouldn't take their word as absolute. You don't work for the consultant agency. You work for your leadership. That was really an interesting point when at a company I was at, they wanted to make the operational change and leadership, senior leadership bought into it, actually spent the money to say, let's go do this. And everyone was like looking at leadership like, are you sure? And leadership was like, well, that's what the consultation says. It's like, well, we don't work for the consultants. We work for you. Are you sure this is what you want to do? Because if that's the case and you do put your money into this, we're going to go execute this. And since it's money spent, you best believe leadership was going to track that to closure. And it completely happened. The irony, in my personal opinion, is that once it was completed, my personal opinion is that they did not receive the benefits to the extent that they thought they were going to receive at point of outbrief. Once they actually spent the money, they implemented the changes, the benefits that they received were not as high as what they were projected to be. And that happens. I mean, that happens. And this is another reason why you can't take their word as Bible, because time passes. The assumptions that they made during the project may not be the same assumptions that exist when it's time to implement and execute it. If you were a business that was comprised of, let's say, 5 different divisions, and the consultation was done in order to figure out how all 5 of those divisions operate as one and could synergize across, but then after the outbrief, let's say 6 months later, you sell 2 of those divisions, that's a different project now. That doesn't work the same way. And you kind of need a refresh and a reassessment based off of the new assumptions you have to accurately develop a good plan of attack to address making the 3 remaining divisions operate and synergize as one. It could happen. So you can definitely embrace the consultant team, definitely do that, but don't take their word as absolute. Look for guidance from your leadership. The last action I want to talk about, last story I'm going to give, goes back to the third action in the kitchen. When we were talking about consultations and consultants, we were talking mainly external. You also can be a consultant. That's what we talked about in the kitchen. So the follow-up action to that is build your subject matter expertise. You have to build it. Because I'm part of the younger generation, I always get a lot of questions in regards to technology. How do you do this? How do you run this program? How do you do this feature? Small stuff like that, which is totally fine. I get that. But now that I've gotten some years under my belt, I actually get people to ask me about functional things related to the function that I was working. And I've done probably 3 total different functions in my career. I do consider myself a subject matter expert in 2 of them, 2 out of the 3. It showed for me when I became in one of the functions, we had some attrition and some career development that happened that made me the most senior person in the group. So by default, I was the subject matter expert, and that is one of those uncomfortable feelings where it's like, oh, okay, so everyone's gonna come to you for questions, and who can you go to if you're the most senior one? Well, now you got to go to yourself and really figure it out. If you're ever in that spot, it is super nerve wracking. I was super nervous. I was concerned that I wouldn't have all the answers. And also, what do I do if I can't find the answers? They're going to be looking at me to make the decision. But if I'm not comfortable, if I don't have a high confidence level in it, what do I do? Well, if you're ever in that situation, do the same thing I did. You have to embrace it as an opportunity. It is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to build your subject matter expertise. The couple things that I did in order to address this gap of where I felt I needed to be as a subject matter expert versus where I was at the time was threefold. Couple things I did. One, I did consult with people that used to work in that organization and went over certain scenarios and past stories from them of things that we tried to implement. Why did it fail or why did it succeed? Two, read through policies, procedures, specifications. I mean, reading is so fundamental. Reading is so fundamental, and you have to know your specs, your company's specifications, your company's policies, your company's procedures. It's you just got to know them. The most senior people in my company can just rattle off the spec numbers off the top of their head. That doesn't necessarily show subject matter expertise, but at least it shows that they have read it, they understood it. And when they reference it, they're not going to talk about what's in it. They're going to be like, oh, per this spec. And it's like, oh, well, what does the spec say? Well, I know it's per this spec. And now, I have to go look. And if I'm not caught up and generally know the contents of that spec, I'm going to be falling behind in the conversation. So that's the second thing I did, really caught up on policies and procedures. And the third is just go through the trials and tribulations. At the end of the day, it's an opportunity. You can never be 100% prepared for it. If you think about athletes, they play in high school, they play in college, and it gives you as much preparation as possible, but you'll never be prepared for the pro game. You'll never be prepared to walk on that stage with the amount of people that will be in the stands cheering or booing, the lights, the cameras, the speed, the feedback, until you actually go through it. You have to go through those experiences in order to build your subject matter expertise. If we think about some of the greatest players to ever play the sport, I'm just going to go with football. No, basketball's better, right? Let's go with Michael Jordan and LeBron James, two arguably 1 and 2 and the greatest basketball players to ever play the game. They both came into the league and they did well. I mean, LeBron went straight out of high school and did well his freshman year, rookie year in the league. But at the same time, to achieve the greatness that both of them did in the championships, the goal was championships, right? In order to achieve that, they had to build on their subject matter expertise. What do we call that in basketball? We call that basketball IQ. They built their IQ. Part of that also included just building their overall skill set. But I think LeBron James is a great example specifically because he is a great example of the progression to an all-time great and how you start off green. It doesn't matter how much prep you had. He had the most hype national championship game for high school ever. Just ever. It was nationally televised. It was huge. And with his skill set in high school, They said that he was ready for professional basketball. Absolutely understand that, right? But he was never really ready for professional basketball until once he got on the court and he saw what it was. Once you actually get through those experiences to see, okay, so this is what the NBA is like. Now, the preparation you can do after that is true NBA prep rather than anticipated NBA prep. Everything he was doing prior to being on the Cleveland Cavaliers was anticipation. You could have played with NBA players while you were in high school. You see this all the time, especially at camps where the top prospects, whether they're in high school or through their AAU team, are playing with active NBA players for pickup games. It's not the same NBA speed. It doesn't have the referees that the NBA has. It doesn't have the lights, the cameras, the stadium. There's a lot that goes to it. The whole atmosphere is different when you're doing the camp version than when you're actually on the court with your team's jersey on. So once LeBron got his Cleveland Cavaliers jersey on, played a couple games, good. Good. Now you know how to truly adjust. And guess what? Now instead of prepping at that point, you transition out of prepping to now you're just building on the expertise you have. I know this. I went through it. I need to build on it. You have to do the same thing in corporate America. You went through school, you prepped yourself. I did that. I went through school, I prepped myself, got into corporate America. Some people on my team left. I was left as the most senior person. Does that mean I can't do the job? No, that means that I'm going to go through experiments. There's going to be sometimes that I pass or sometimes I fail. There was a couple times where I needed to do some go backs. I told someone information that wasn't 100% accurate, and then I had to go back and correct it and make sure that they had the correct information. There were also times where I didn't have the answer at the time. So I had to say and raise my hand, I need a couple hours or I need 24 hours to get the correct answer. I know the people who I need to ask, but I myself don't have the correct answers at this time. That's all part of building your subject matter expertise because it's giving you more and more examples. It's giving you more trials to build upon to increase that knowledge base, educate you. And therefore, when you go through that situation again or a similar situation, you've already been equipped with the knowledge on how to deal with it. Same thing when you're like in the NBA. Same thing when you're in the kitchen. I mean, let's go back to the corporate kitchen for a second. Same thing in the kitchen. If you're making bread for the first time, and I'm not saying with the bread maker where you can just mix all the ingredients, press the button, call it done. No, no, no. Bread. And you're trying to figure out how much of each ingredient to make, when to stop mixing, how soft does the butter need to be before you put it in, how to fold. If you're making, let's say, buns out of this bread, how to properly fold the bread to get a nice, symmetrical, good shaped bun. You may not get it right on the first time. That's fine. Second time, you'll do better. A really good one. Ready? Macaroni and cheese. Did you get your brie right? Did you use the right mix of cheeses? Did you stir for enough time and leave it sitting for enough time? The first time you do it may not come out perfect, but after that, you went through it and now you understand it and now you can make the tweaks, especially once you get it really good now. Once you get it good enough to where you can now tweak the recipe, that's your subject matter expertise. That's when you know you're a subject matter expert, where I know how to do this. So now I'm going to tamper with the recipe and I'm going to add my own little touch and little flavor to it. This happened for me in corporate, and this will be the last story that I tell. This happened to me in corporate in one of my roles when I realized that the way that we were working was really, really, I would say one-sided. Without going into much detail about it, it was really one-sided and it was really, at the time, data-driven reactive. And that's what I mean by one-sided. Data-driven reactive, that we really never got in front of issues. We just reacted to all the issues. And I became really good at reacting to all the issues that came about. The problem that I identified was like, how do we get in front of these issues? There were logical solutions that we could have done that people could have come to the conclusion about. And trust me, all the other functions were saying, you guys should be doing this, you guys should be doing that. But that wasn't in our job description, nor was it something that was a part of everyday life. And also, it costs money. So once I built my subject matter expertise high enough on how to react properly, I was able to, at that point, create the correct mythology to address the gap that I believe existed on the front end. I presented that to my leadership. I got my leadership's buy-in. I reviewed previous consultations, the documentations left from them, to see if anyone previously addressed this, any lessons learned I can pick from it. I highly recommend that for you as well. If you're going to introduce what you believe to be as a new idea to the corporation and you need buy-in on it, make sure you check to see if it was ever done before. Check the historical records to understand, did anyone else try this? When did they try it? And why did it fail or succeed? That's what I did when I was looking at the previous consultations. No one ever tried to address this portion of it. So I felt good. I got opinions from some of my peers, so I had to tweak it based off of some good insight they gave me on their perspectives. And then it came out to the actual project, got the buy-in from my leadership, executed it, and it worked pretty well. It didn't work, again, to where I projected it would be, which that was okay. I mean, I left my expectations super high there, but it worked pretty well and it made a significant change. So when you do that, now it's like, okay, I've already built my subject matter expertise to be able to present this. And now I presented this project that works too. I am the subject matter expert. I feel good about this. And because of those two things, it's a blessing and a curse, because now everyone's going to start asking you questions. Everyone starts asking you questions like, when can I get some work done when I'm not answering questions? Well, you're always going to be answering questions as a subject matter expert. That's why you always have to remember that you'll become the expert eventually. So, wrapping up this, key actions that comes out of this: make sure you embrace the consultant team when you do have an opportunity to get involved with the project they're working on. Regardless of whatever the outcome is, look for guidance from your leadership to understand what the actual follow-up is going to be. And then third, build your own subject matter expertise. Make sure you're building that, because there's plenty of ways you can do it. There's plenty of opportunities that you could either seek yourself or exist out there that you can go grab. You know, it almost makes me think of...
Hey, you said last story. Can you wrap this up?
Oof. Okay. I enjoyed working on this menu item with you this week, but let's come to an end while it's still hot. Remember, the ending to one story is the beginning of another. There will be more in store next week at the Corporate Kitchen. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Tiger. Until next time.